I'm live. Hopefully, you can hear me. If not, this is going to be a complete waste. Supposedly, the Yeti should be working. Otherwise, this little light here would be blinking. So, all about poetry. I just finished this poem called Coffee Cafe. It was sitting in my notebook here for a long time. I had some of the verses written out. Hi, Shane and Phil Tompkins. Awesome. This is a boring topic, but it's the one thing I'm good at is poetry. So I've selected, a sampling of my poetry, and I'm going to share it. Coffee Cafe. Finally got this one done. I'm pretty happy with it. Took me a while. Sometimes you have to let things sit. I'm developing principles of poetry. One of my lines is to, let things, sometimes you have to let things sit. I don't have it quite organized. Number one, don't start with rhymes, start with ideas or a message. Know what you want to say before you figure out how to say it. Number two, if it doesn't sound quite right, switch up the order. Substitute this, switch up the subject and the direct object. Don't settle for an unsatisfactory verse. Either delete it or rewrite it. 3 of my weakest verses became my best verses. And I will, of course, put the examples down. But one of them was, I won't talk about that. I'll do that another time. Here's Coffee Cafe. Share this with you. If I had the money and time of day, you'd never leave me. You'd never see me leave this coffee cafe. I'd be a living permanent guest and making this table my personal desk. My laptop before me, my coffee in hand. There isn't much else I need to have planned. I'd write out my blogs and recheck my feed. There isn't much else in this life that I need. I never drink coffee that comes from a pot. Freshly grind every extra espresso shot. And let's not forget that sweet foamy cream, lest you mess up my heavenly fantasy dream. How's the sound? Derek, thanks for joining. Just going off for the least appreciated art, maybe, of all time. Something I'm good at, but, unlike the 1910s, it's not really in vogue anymore. So I think it got ruined. Even though Dr. Seuss did a good job of bringing it in, it still hasn't caught on. I think it's because of poisonous poetry. You've got negative. You also have poetry that doesn't rhyme. I think that's done a lot to ruin poetry. Okay, but I'm married to somebody that loves coffee. Derek says I don't love coffee as much as you do. I'm vicariously addicted. It's part of my prenuptial agreement to drink coffee. I have another poem, but I'm not going to read it about that. I wrote it for Jenny. We'll do that another time. I have just a little bit of a little sampling of my poetry that I'm going to read from, for those who want to watch. But I challenge you to find better poetry than I can write. It's the one thing I know I'm better than or as good as anybody. And if you had one thing that you were really good at, probably better than anyone, even if it wasn't popular, I think you'd be pretty proud of that. So it's my one contribution. And I guess in order to become famous, I would have to save the whole art of poetry and make it become vogue. And I think maybe the first step to doing that is writing good poetry that resonates with people. Here's one called God's Work. I did this the other day and I tortured the whatever out of it. Yeah, such humility. Hey, it is what it is, man. I have general talent, but this is the one thing. But I've been working on this since 20. So 15 years I've been working on poetry. Most of it, and I'll be the first to admit, most of my poems are junk. Okay, most of them, because I wrote a lot of poems, and I can't really save all of them. They're just really bad. Um, but lately, and this could be the delusion of novelty. That should be a one of the written in there in my principles of poetry, which will be a book someday. Maybe a very short book, but is the delusion of novelty. When you write something new, it looks awesome, and you kind of overlook all of the mistakes or the things that do not work well. And so you have to set it aside, not think about it for about a week, come back to it, and the mistakes and the bad parts will be more visual. But this one I wrote all in one day. This is the work of God, and so far I haven't seen anything bad about it. But if I do see it, I will mention it. If God is good, then why is there bad? But if God is bad, then how is there good? Now, this first verse does not rhyme, but there's no way to rhyme it. I haven't found it necessary to rhyme, because after that is when the rhyming comes. Okay. If God is almighty and able to see, how is it that He can let awful be? If He is like us and we are like Him, allowing these awful things seems like a sin. Are we then expected to make our resolve this riddle unravel, this puzzle to solve? How cruel it would be if we see but can't do, if we're so inclined to see that thing through. Look at the past and all we have done. We've made life less lousy and a whole lot more fun. I knew there was an L to put there. And I actually used a thesaurus in order to find it. Lousy, because I was less bad, less awful. I'd already used awful. You don't want to use the same word over again. We've made life less lousy and a whole lot more fun. That's homiletics, and it really, Dr. Seuss did a good job of making that happen. Adds to it. Are you waiting on God? Are His commandments unclear? We're to do good in the time we are here. We're to make better and the wretched displace, and solve every problem we find that we face. Now, originally I had the wretched replace, but that wasn't quite good enough. You want to displace it. That makes it have to go away. Replacing it, you're just moving it around like a chess piece. So that fit perfectly, in my opinion. So be of good cheer, and don't dare you despair. For all that we know, we're half the way there. If God's work is in us, and His work is through us, the powers of evil can't possibly compare. This was very moving when I wrote it, especially verse 3 in the last verse. Verse 3 is, if He is like us and we are like Him, allowing these awful things seems like a sin. Looking at all the terrible things in the world. And I thought, at least the first 3 verses ought to be read by a child, because it's exactly what a child would say. Ask these questions that we all think, but we don't ask them out loud. But it does end in good hope, and pretty happy with that. I don't see anything I could change about it, and that's maybe it's the 10,000 hours rule. Probably have spent 10,000 hours writing poetry. This is one that a very early one, and there's not too many early ones that are worthy of being read aloud. That's another thing I have to write down. Poetry should be read aloud and not, hi Nancy, thanks for joining. This is about poetry. Probably saw that in the description. And I'm just going over some of my, a sampling of the different subjects. There is no love poems in this one. I'll save that for February, I guess. But all these are non-love poems, and you'll have to watch the beginning of this later to get the new ones that I just wrote and shared with you. One of them for the first time. But this is called Cascade, and I wrote this within 30 minutes. And it's one of the few ones that I originally wrote in 2004 when I was just beginning to write poetry that has made it. And it has been modified somewhat, but I don't think it's been modified much. But this is so unique because there's very short lines and it's an A-B rhyme. So there's A-B, A-B is each verse, and you'll hear that in this. Just one line to write, and then I'm done. I'll call it a night, but that's no fun. There's more to say. There's more to type. It's no longer day, but my mind is right. It's obsession, I'm sure. I know that's true, but it sounds so pure and looks so new. It's all laid out up in my head like a pre-planned route my hand is led. To write at will, without much thought, what little thrill that must be sought. New ways to say just what I think, small price to pay for priceless ink. I type the close and hope to send a figment rose with a lovely end. I've emptied my head with much cascade, and when all is said, fine art is made. Now, one thing that sticks out to me in this is that second to last verse. I just don't like it, but I can't delete it. So it's still there. I typed the close and hope to send a figment rose with a lovely end. That was the last verse. And I switched the order because I didn't want to end with that. And I probably end up cutting that before it goes in a poetry book. Nancy can help me learn how to self-publish. So I have shared with you one about coffee, a coffee shop specifically. Nancy would probably like that for the coffee shop you go to. Not surprised you appreciate words with rhyme and rhythm and rhyme. Thank you. Yeah, it's the one thing I'm not embarrassed about. Also, I sing, but maybe I should be embarrassed about that. So there's Coffee. Cascade is about writing. I have more about the actual art itself. I don't think I'm going to be sharing that this time around. Second chance. At some point, I think we all look back at life and wonder if we could have done something differently. And this really captures it captures that, and I think a lot of people can relate to this line of thought, and its conclusion is very satisfying, I think. Given the chance to do it over again, the first question I'd ask would be, where to begin? Of all of the years that I've lived in the past, which point would I pick to recast? Sent back as a child that knew what I know, which part of my childhood would I go? Were I sent back to again be a teen, I could write anew on a slate that was clean. Had I my 20s to do one more time, no doubt I believe that the world would be mine. If I were placed at my lowest of lows, are there things I would change? I'm not sure. Who knows? All that has happened from way back then has brought me the journey to where I am. If not here, then where would I be? There isn't much comfort in what I can't see. Alas, I'll collect what years that remain and assemble a tomorrow, whether sunshine or rain. That last verse went through a lot of renovations, especially the second one, the second part of that. Originally, it was, and assemble a tomorrow with both sunshine and rain. But with both is a trip up, is a tongue twist, and it wasn't working. Then I said, enjoying the sunshine, embracing the rain. But I wasn't satisfied with that. Oh, the first one was, and assemble a tomorrow with a little less pain. But that is kind of gloomy. So I settled with, and assemble a tomorrow, whether sunshine or rain. And that worked for me. That's called Second Chance. I don't have the when I wrote that, but it was like last year. I will skip those and go to this one. The key to learning. This is an opinion that I strongly hold. And I put it in a poem because I think that's the best way to do it. The key to learning. They say that when learning, repetition is key, but that isn't so, were you to ask me. Saying it over and over and over again may be the worst method of any and 10. Scrap that idea, and the secret I'll tell. If you have the ingredient, you'll do very well. It starts with a question, a what or a why, an inquisitive mind with an ear or an eye. The foundation of learning, as you'll hopefully see, is motivation that comes from curiosity. For if you aren't interested enough to inquire, no long-term information will you ever acquire. You may in the short term pass a Q&A quiz, but in a time frame that counts though, you'll be no whiz. So make yourself curious and you'll have begun in your learning journey this step number 1. Be curious, my friends. Of course, this third from the last, I don't like how it rhymes, but I haven't spent any time to try to replace it. For if you aren't interested enough to inquire, no long-term information will you ever acquire. Those are too close. It's almost like using the same word over again, which is not good poetry. So, but you have to say what you're going to say, and I might change that someday. I rhymed. Okay, this one is called Chess. We've all been through some hard times in our lives, and I've probably written one too many poems about that. I don't like writing things about, that are depressing or whatever, but this was compelling, and it may be the last one I write about that. It's called Chess. And it, poetically describes my life in 2008-9, when I had a lawn business and I had employees. I had over 200 properties under management, and then the recession hit, and a lot of things went into the demise of that business. But this kind of captures it in an abstract way. Chess was the game, and I was the king, and all of my pawns were in place. With bishops, knights, and rooks by my side, I stood poised with a poker face. Armed with ambition and clothed with good luck, we charged like an infantry. My big break in life came years much too soon, in my prime of naivety. My pawns were plundered, my cadre captured, and I was a king with no crown. My coffers, my wallet, and even my life were as empty as a cup upside down. That's all I have for that one. I guess it's finished. I don't know. Don't know if it's finished. Seems good enough. Here's one that is definitely pessimistic. I call it the BFG, but I don't really have a good title for it. Big freaking deal, I guess. Be what it's supposed to be for. I don't know. I'm probably going to find a better title. Oh, Derek says, Oh, where does my love for poetry come from? Who did you admire growing up that was good at it? I was in college and I almost printed out the first poem I wrote. I don't like it. I tried to save it. It's not that good. So I was this close to printing it out so I could show you. Maybe in another time I will. It's called Greener Grass. And it talks about wanting, it's basically trying to find the balance between ambition and appreciation for what you have. Um, I don't know. Uh, it was my sophomore year, right before I was called to go to Afghanistan. I had started working on it. I had lots of time. The VA was paying for my college, and somehow I was intrigued by it. I don't know what triggered that. Um, but I started and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I thought I was pretty clever. And at that point, at 21, it's a weird place because I thought I was clever, but I didn't think I was smart, you know. I didn't think I was above average smart until 25. So why I thought I could do poetry, I don't know. But I started, and I think it was the delusion of novelty that kept me going. Because going back, I mean, for the whole year in Afghanistan, I wrote lots of poetry. I just kept writing, and I would always go back and rewrite. I kept going back and rewrite. My poems would not stay the same. They would just continually be modified. And I thought, wow, I guess this is how poetry is always going to be for me. Up until the last couple of years, and I'm sure there was a year or two that I didn't write any poetry. And I probably should spend more time doing it. But like the first principle is don't write poetry just to write it. Unless you, hi Tyler, thanks for joining. Um, unless you want to practice. Uh, it's good to practice, write poetry about whatever, see if you can do it, and then get better. It takes a lot of time. And like I said, most of my poems are bad because I wrote a lot of poems before I was good. I consider myself good now, and I've been pretty happy with the poetry that I've written, and they get less modifications going back. Still get some, but a lot of those modifications all happen in one day, like the poem God's Work. I don't think I'm going to be modifying that anymore. It looks pretty good after a couple of weeks. Does Jenny share your love for poetry as well? Is Jenny there, and can she say hi? Merry Christmas to you both. Derek's wanting you to say hi. She's saying no.
I'll say hi, but I'm not getting on camera.
Okay, she's not getting on camera. So did you hear that? Merry Christmas to both of you from Derek. She's giving the thumbs up. She's very camera shy. I should be, but I'm not. I actually did comb my hair and I shaved so I wouldn't look too bad. I actually had my hair was sticking up earlier and I went out to the coffee shop looking like an idiot. Yep. So to answer your question, she does. She likes the poems that I write for her, and she would rather I keep them for her. Because if I share them with the whole world, then they're less special for her. And I understand that. But they're really good. Some of them are really good. Hard to not share them with the rest of the world, but I'll have to. If she wants me to, I can share her favorite poem she has printed out there. And there's another one that I thought was good, but I must have made it 3 or 4 years ago. What I Love About You, I'm just not happy with it. I'm going to end up fixing that. I'm not sure what I call this one, but it's the pessimistic one I was going to do here. And here's how it goes. Bob Parnell, hi. John Harris, hi. Thanks for joining. Hope I don't bore you too much with poetry. I'm almost done with this. But that's all I'm doing this for this live, I want to say Periscope. It's not a Periscope, it's a live Facebook. It's pristine in the spring and a mess in the autumn. You have to do this one with a Irish accent. You're alone at the top, but it's empty at the bottom. And let's not forget in this baffling riddle, You're bound to get lost if you stay in the middle. Whatever you've done and whatever you'll do will likely disappear not long after you. You're probably thinking what I've said is absurd and are hoping I end with an encouraging word. So don't, so I won't say more than what I've already said, because it won't be remembered much after I'm dead. So pessimistic, but it's funny. That's why I can't not share that one. This was, I have a note here, was trying to be verse 3, but it never worked out. Your greatest accomplishment will stay behind, will fade when you go. Doesn't even rhyme. I don't even know why I kept it. Oh well, kind of notes. Here is a grand finale one for this part of my sampling. I do have Agape, was written for 1 Corinthians 13. Maybe I'll share that beforehand, before the grand finale. All right, this was written in 2006, inspired by 1 Corinthians 13. And I probably do one on all of the Bible poems that I've written. This would be included in there. I think you'll enjoy this, actually. I feel that it is amateurish, and I'm not completely proud of it, but I do feel like people might like it because it's rhyming 1 Corinthians 13. It's called Agape. Greater than the grip of hell, stronger than a clenching spell, power more than one can tell, love will never fail. Though I speak philosophy, though I say a prophecy, though I seek a mystery, all of these shall fail. Though I feed and clothe the poor, though I heal a wound or sore, though I give my all and more, these deeds of mine shall fail. Love is always meek and kind, love never speaks the mind, love a way can always find, for it shall never fail. Everything it can always bear, belief and faith it can always share. Hope and duration are always there, because love shall never fail. For God is love, and so we see that love and charity will always be a timeless theme eternally, for love shall always prevail. Agape. That sticks pretty close to the text, other than the first verse. There's that one biblical contribution there. And Poetized, here's for the grand finale. And so yeah, that was 2006. Let me prepare for this last one. I also have another one in the spirit of this, more of, I guess there's probably a little bit of pompous. I wrote one called The Pompous Poet, and I think this is a split off. Sometimes a poem splits apart, two different themes. And so there might be a hint of, yeah, oh, there's definitely a hint of condescension and pompous arrogance and all that stuff. But it's pretty good. All right. Words are my toys, and rhymes are my plaything. This, by the way, would be used with a French accent. Nothing against the French. It just, sometimes poetry comes with its own voice. When I write a sentence, I can sure make it sing. I'll tickle your ears and poetize, while vowels and consonants harmonize. A notebook is my canvas, a pen is my brush, and what I put together might make you blush. A thought is my sculpture, and ink is my clay. You'll see what I mean when you hear what I say. Each page is a stage, and each word is an actor. A verse is a script, and my lips are director. Each letter is a note, as if played by musicians, only if spoken by my strict conditions. When you hear what I write, you'll be begging for more. Perhaps I might bless you with another encore. There's that. Poetized, a word I made up for a title. And Of course, it's not, this is kind of an identity disassociation with that one because it's so arrogant that I would not want to identify with the words of that poem, but I wrote it for fun, really. Any more questions before I log off? 30 minutes. Wow, I managed to get 30 minutes out of there and a thumbs up. Nice. I could have invited friends. It's a Monday. I didn't expect to get a lot of views. Maybe in the post-production, once it's posted, people will see the other parts of it. Before I go, yeah, I'm still working on principles of poetry, rich rhyming. There should be a subtitle to it, and just putting down. If you could, yeah, this is what I was thinking about earlier. If you get stuck, stop, delete or change the last verse or line. Say it differently, let it marinate for a while. Write a Christmas poem. I do have Christmas poems, so I don't know if any of them are good, but I might do a little 5-minute thing for that. I'll get it set up. Because this is my contribution to society. This is the one thing I think I'm better than anybody that I know. I look up poetry on YouTube or anywhere, and it's just awful, awful stuff. It's like, why do you even call it poetry? Why? No wonder people hate poetry, because a lot of it is terrible. And I understand sometimes I think people are turned off by the over emotionalizing, and I have some of those. They're written in an emotional way, and it makes people feel uncomfortable. Thanks, Derek. And another reason might be, the bad poetry. It doesn't rhyme, or if it does rhyme, the meter isn't there. So you have to have good meter. Otherwise, rhyming is nonsense. You can have it rhyme, but if it doesn't sound right. Another thing about poetry is it's better if it's performed than if it's read, because sometimes it could be written fine. It could be written just right, but you're not always ready to read it correctly the first time. So it has to be performed. John Michael Ramos, thanks for joining. This is poetry, you're not interested. So I'm just wrapping this up actually. So yeah, I'm going to develop this because I actually want to do a live thing about this. Principles of poetry. I'm still working on organizing it, how to write. I think it'd be helpful. Probably I will look up for somebody to have. Some of these poems, by the way, I have spent lots of time memorizing while the truck is loading with water. I can't have my cell phone out there, so I print this stuff out, and this is why I have a notebook. All this is all the stuff that I do. It's almost filled up. This is a notebook with 120 sheets. I would say at least 90 of them are written upon. There's a little section of unwritten, but it's not all poetry. There it is. Okay, that's rewritten, I think. Coffee Cafe that I did earlier. Okay, so I ripped out the original one, and there were some verses I had to delete because they were terrible and they didn't fit. There's different layers to poetry. You have to have the story or the thought can lead, and I'll go through that another time. Anyway, I'm going to keep this where it is, and I'm going to end it. So thanks for being with me. Appreciate it. You have a good day.